Hi, my name is Chale Roach, and welcome to IDUOYP, otherwise known as Illicit Drug Use in Our Youth podcast. Today's title is regarded as Fentanyl's New Playground. I'm your host, Chale Roach, as an assignment at Alliant International University. Let's get into it, you guys. Hi. So when we're talking about fentanyl being in the playground, it's metaphorically speaking, but in some cases, it's physically speaking. Now, a lot of people don't realize how popular fentanyl is. They hear about it and how it's used in dangerous situations with adults, but it's barely discussed on how it's impacting our adolescent. Its original development started as a medical use, just like any other drug. But the difference with this particular drug is it's 50 to 100 times stronger than any other opioid. When we're talking about opioids, we're talking about morphine or heroin. Now, back in 2021, Science News actually did an article in which 1,500 kids under the age of 20 actually died from fentanyl abuse. And some of it was them being aware that they were actually using fentanyl, and while another percentage were completely unaware. When we're talking about illegal forms in which fentanyl is provided, we're talking about across the board. Even though we're focusing today on our podcast specifically juveniles, you have to remember this drug was originally created for medical use, and it was just prescribed by doctors originally in shot form, or it could be used in a patch for someone's skin, or even sucked through lodges for cough drops. A lot of people aren't aware of this, but there's actually a scale in which how juveniles are receiving this particular drug. On a scale from 5 being the rarest and 1 being the most common, starting with eye drops. Yes, it does come in eye drops. There are specific cases in which I even have seen clients smuggle them into rehabs as a way of still having drug use and staff not being aware of the current drug being popular. Also, nasal sprays are another commonality because of the liquid being clear and its consistency. Candy, another popular way in which fentanyl can be implemented, such as raves or farm parties. If a lot of people aren't aware, farm parties are in which teenagers throw any type of party, like we've all done at one point or another, but we all bring medicine from our family's house. And often this creates a place for drug dealers to also, you know, recruit their services to their friends. And then we have pills and marijuana, which a lot of people are aware of. And then, of course, the most common is powder. Now, a lot of people would debate maybe that the pills and marijuana are more common, but you guys have to remember the powder is usually used to create counterfeit pills, and it also is placed in more marijuana, unknowingly recruiting a lot of juveniles into a life of substance abuse because they're thinking they're taking a drug that's, in society's point of view, less harming, um, and actually taking a more addictive drug. When we're talking about juvenile delinquency crimes linked to fentanyl, of course, the number one issue is supply and distribution, aka the drug trafficker or the drug dealer. Remember how I was saying those farm parties usually create the solicitation of suppliers? Well, recently, LA Times did an article on two teenagers accused of supplying fentanyl linked to at least one juvenile death. Now, their main distribution was actually an 18-year-old. So remember, as I said in the beginning, a lot of the deaths are actually happening under the age of 20, which is in fact true because the crimes linked to that age range are considered not as harsh as it is an adult, which is not, in fact, not true because in other states they're actually attempting to make it a murder charge for adults. Well, in some states it has happened already, but that is becoming the consistency throughout the United States. Now, juveniles are still in that space in which they're considered unaware of all their decisions and how it impacts them, so it's still in that space of limbo. And then we have counterfeit pills, which also, like I was saying, how they have these farm parties where they're actually mixing drugs. Now, some of these traffickers, they actually mix fentanyl, remember, because I told you it's very potent, with other drugs to pass it off as a designer drug. But in fact, it's actually fentanyl, and it's actually killing them at a faster rate. And the last one is actually sex trafficking. It's highly used in sex trafficking for adolescents. I know we get the discussions about how sex trafficking happens to a lot of women and young girls, but it actually is happening to young men at a faster rate that is not being discussed because of the taboo nature of how rape rape myths look towards males. When we're looking at sociological factors contributing to the involvement of juveniles in fentanyl use, we're always looking at mental health and its suicide rates. The increase in use of fentanyl by teens may be related to other problems on the rise. And when we're talking about we're seeing an increase of bipolar disorder and other personality disorders that actually are affecting this use as a way of self-treating, which is still underdocumented. And then we have parental substance abuse disorder, which is a commonality in which a lot of people are aware or have a lot of ideas in which teens start using due to their parents being substance abuse users. Another link to this is parents who are completely neglectful or combative in the parental and child relationship. This may cause the child also to engage in drug use, especially if they know it's fentanyl and it's dangerous. It's almost as a way of flirting with suicide, even though that's not the best terms to use it. This is the ideology they have as a way of involving themselves in a slow death. Many teens have discussed this in therapy sections. And then overall, the family, peer, and school relationship. That should be a given. If they're having a lot of hard times in either of these areas, sometimes it tends to culminate into fentanyl use, whether they realize it or not. When we're talking about juvenile delinquency, a lot of times they're coerced. There are many times when they're not. But in situations like September 16th, in which Maya Mahia of Pleasanton was arrested by police, and she was found with 33 grams of cocaine on her, and it actually tested positive for fentanyl. She actually had another passenger in her car, which was a juvenile from San Antonio, and he had THC, which is marijuana, as most of us should know by now, in the pen, and a firearm. They were believed to be trafficking at that time using fentanyl as a way to cut the drug, according to San Antonio News and MSN News. When we're talking about potential implications for policy and prevention strategies, we're talking about policy responses. Now, since this particular podcast is located in California, we're going to focus on the initiatives made in this particular state. For example, there is a master plan created by Governor Newsom regarding aggressive steps towards opiate use. And it involves a big budget, of course, when we're talking about policy, in which 79 million of Naxalone distribution project to meet increased demands. So meaning to counteract when the drug hits and it creates an overdose, it's a shot that medical professionals can use. It's in contrast to Narcan. Narcan is what you guys see where sometimes you see cops or any other professionals where they kind of have the individual sniff it or suck it through their mouth, depending the form. Then we have a 10 million grant towards education and testing. So recovering, when we're talking about juveniles, that means more testing involved regarding fentanyl use and signs, because some of the signs can be confusion or looking extremely depressed or tired or sometimes nauseous, and those have been confused with adolescents by staff as just being like normal adolescent behavior, being tired or overwhelmed. Another issue in which another way they're trying to address the issue is 4 million to make the test strips widely available to catch fentanyl in schools. Then there's Prop 98 regarding the funding to provide overdose medication to middle schools. Now, all that stuff I was talking about before was adults and high school. This is specifically for middle school. Well, it was proposed to focus on middle school and a little on high schools, but mostly middle school, and that's 3.5 million towards the overdose of adolescents. Okay. And then when we're talking about nationwide prevention strategies, as we all know, our current president, Biden, is having an approach where he's expanding the access to evidence prevention treatment and harm reduction. So he wants it more available in facilities where as I said before, there have been clients in the past where, in this particular host is experienced where they've smuggled this drug into facilities. It will not be so much penalized if this does happen. We're working on more of a harm reduction and recovery support. So when it does happen, the staff as well as the clientele will know how to react more, besides having to Narcan a fellow peer or a client due to the drug use. We want to know why individuals are smuggling it into facilities and what actions, instead of using strictly the court system to send them straight to jail. So more of these individuals who are engaging in fentanyl substance abuse, instead of going to the juvenile justice system, creating barriers in their life, they're most likely will go to rehab. Thank you for listening to today's podcast regarding fentanyl's new playground. Once again, I'm your host, Chale Roach, and I hope you learned enough regarding juvenile delinquency and its relation to fentanyl abuse. And I hope you guys have a delightful day and keep learning.